In 2004, among the anticipation of the live-action Bill Murray Garfield movie, 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment began experimenting with re-releasing the original 1980s Garfield TV movies in brand new DVD packages. This began with Garfield as himself in June 2004, which included Here Comes Garfield, Garfield on the Town, and Garfield Gets a Life. Arguably the perfect trilogy for a viewer who has no personal history with the character but want to understand why he's such a cultural phenomenon. This continued in October 2004 with Garfield Holiday Celebrations, which included Garfield's Halloween Adventure, Garfield's Thanksgiving, and a Garfield Christmas. For most of these specials, this was the first home media release that they had seen in over a decade, and these DVDs performed very well, bringing the original Garfield movies into the homes of a new generation. However, because Fox owned the home video rights to the Garfield TV specials, but not the Garfield and Friends TV show, by the end of 2005, the company had already run out of material to re-release. And so, on October the 18th, 2005, a mega box set was published. Garfield, Cattails, containing 9 out of the original 12 Garfield TV specials. Unbeknownst to fans at the time, this box set would eventually kickstart an obsessive hunt for a piece of Garfield lost media, because if you bought this box set in 2005 and unwrapped it for the first time, hidden inside of the boxy shell, you were likely to find an obscured pamphlet advertising Garfield in the modern age. Hungry for fun? The front reads, visit garfield.com. This little catalog advertised numerous Garfield oddities of the time, like the official Garfield rewards card, and the tote bag that would come free with any application. But if you had the thought to turn the pamphlet to the other side, you might have seen something that was quite exciting. An advertisement for a brand new Garfield game for the Nintendo DS. A console which wasn't even a year old at this point. The game? Garfield, Bound for Home, scheduled to hit store shelves during the holiday season of 2005. So, what is so mysterious about this flyer? What story does it have to tell? And why are we talking about it today? Let me put it this way. I have in my apartment a complete collection of every Garfield video game ever released as a physical product. And so take it with some authority when I say that the very first Garfield game for the Nintendo DS was Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties, released on the 25th of August, 2006 in Europe, and October the 17th, 2006 in America. What this means is that this extremely rare pamphlet advertises a Garfield video game which never came into being. Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, this is the mystery of Garfield, Bound for Home. So before I start my little explanation here, I want to say a few things. I am no stranger to researching Garfield lost media, and in fact, about 6 months ago, I did an extensive research project into another lost Garfield game, which I keep meaning to find time to make a video about. But when it comes to this specific topic, I have done nothing and have been useful to no one. As far as I know, this topic began being researched when this pamphlet was rediscovered by Chili_Coop, a YouTuber who is known for being into Garfield as a brand and as a meme. A lot of further research has been done by people like The Drunken Brick and Household Warrior, who have done a lot of research and have contacted a ton of people. There are of course others who have done legwork, and I'll be straight with you about this. I have just stood around and been annoying. And I'm only here today to discuss this story so more people can be aware of the situation. So before we analyze this game, its strange history, and the potential leads, let's talk about some fundamentals. One company you're going to be hearing about a lot during this video is the Game Factory. This was a Danish company who served as the distributor of Garfield handheld games from 2004 to 2007. The 4 titles they helped distribute in various regions were Garfield, The Search for Pookie for the GBA in 2004. Garfield, His 9 Lives for the GBA in 2006. Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties for the Nintendo DS in 2006, and Garfield's Nightmare for the Nintendo DS in 2007. While all of these games share a publisher, not a single one shares a developer. Respectively, Interactive Vision, Lucky Jump Games, Two Tribes, and Shinin Multimedia were the 4 companies who helped develop these titles individually, and then pass them along to the Game Factory for distribution. This has been the single biggest roadblock in finding out more information about this game. We know the publisher because it's printed on the ad. It's the Game Factory, like all the others. But what we don't know is the developer. It could be any of the 4 companies who worked on other Garfield handheld titles, or it could be none of them. Now, I trust you at home understand the difference between a developer and a publisher. Apparently 20 years ago, people did not understand this difference. There's a lot of websites that claim that the Game Factory is the developer. Some people claim that the Game Factory is the developer and the publisher. Even more confusingly, the Game Factory had a parent company at the time called KE Media. So some websites will list the Game Factory as the distributor and then list their own parent company as the developer, which doesn't make any sense. So, if this game wasn't being developed by the Game Factory or KE Media, who was the actual group working on it? Well, before we get into that, let's make a quick timeline of events to try and understand the context here. Our story starts in May 2005, directly before that year's E3 conference. Around this time, a blog post written by a Spaniard gaming enthusiast claimed that Nintendo had sent journalists in the area information about the following year of Nintendo releases in Europe. The poster proceeded to list every single game scheduled to release on the Nintendo DS, some with concrete release dates, and others with more vague projected schedules. This list is the earliest currently known reference to this title. Garfield by Game Factory/KE Media, set to release on the DS in October. About a month later, the gaming site Nintendo-X2.com released their own list of European DS titles slated for a 2005 release. And their list was essentially exactly the same. However, later that day, they quickly posted an update. The Garfield DS game now had a title. Garfield, Bound for Home is the name, developed by Game Factory. The game, currently described as an action game, will be released in Europe on October the 17th, 2005. You'll know that this article lists Game Factory as the developer, which we've already agreed isn't accurate. But besides from that, everything has been consistent thus far. This is a Garfield DS game coming out in October 2005. On July the 13th, 2005, 2 different European forums, one located in the Netherlands and one located in France, posted information about the game at the same time, alongside the earliest box art.
There's a new DS game on the way called Garfield Bound for Home. Although we have little to no information about the game yet, the European release is set for November this year. The only thing we can report is that the game will not contain multiplayer. Anyway, we already have the box shot for you.
I'm going to find it difficult to make a news more hollow than this. But still, the Game Factory takes advantage of the popularity of the Garfield license to produce a game based on the Yellow Cat for Nintendo DS. And then you're supposed to say, oh cool, what does it look like? Well, unless you have Madame Soleil on hand, it's going to be hard to tell you, since the only information that is filtered through on this game is that it won't have a multiplayer mode. And then there's also a box art you can check out just below. When I was telling you about Hollow News.
Alright, so try to guess which one of those was written by the French website. In August of 2005, another post is made on the same Netherlands gaming forum, but this time with a very clear plot description.
Garfield has a problem. By constantly whining, criticizing, and ridiculing everyone, Garfield has created a lot of enemies. Wildcat, the creator of some cat clan, has hatched a plan to get rid of Garfield. The cat, mentioned above, will dress up and pose as Garfield, allowing him to enter John's house. His friends also come over, and together they eat all of the food in the house, forcing John to buy more and more food. Eventually, John will become so poor that the Wildcat clan can take over the house.
Okay, so this is kind of a nitpick. I've never understood why this game is called Bound for Home if the entire thing is set inside of Garfield's home. So your goal is to stop John from losing his mortgage because he's buying too much food. So you're bound to keep your home. The theory I eventually came up with was that they probably wanted a title that was a play on words about the game being set inside of a home. So they eventually were thinking about, pop culture references to the word home, and they said, hey, what about that movie, Homeward Bound? And they were like, oh, so our game is Bound for Home. That's clever. Except it's not clever because it doesn't make any sense. And basically my theory is that the title of this game is English wordplay made by someone whose first language is not English. Outside of the plot description, the big reveal made in this post is that there is no longer an announced release date to speak of. We've gone from October 2005 to November 2005 to a bunch of question marks. And this brings us to October the 18th, when Fox releases a 9-movie Garfield box set, which at some point included a flyer advertising Garfield Bound for Home. This ad included a plot description and another brand new release date, due for a release this holiday season. So we have officially gone from October 2005 to November 2005 to no one knows to December 2005. But on that note, it's worth pointing out that one famous eccentricity of Garfield tie-in material is that it takes forever to get anything approved. Because United Feature Syndicate, Paws Incorporated, and now Paramount have always insisted on giving brand approval on every intricate depiction of the character. So what am I getting at? If this box set came out in October, it's almost certain from my vantage point that it was finalized in July or August at the latest. And the fact that this Garfield flyer hasn't been found in any other box set, any other piece of Garfield media, seems to indicate that there was a very short window where this was considered accurate to the Garfield brand. So basically, I think by the time this DVD box set hit store shelves in October 2005, this game was potentially already gone. Because after October 2005, this title goes off the radar. No official sources talking about it, no credible forum posts about news or rumors, nothing. The only other thing to add here is that there are a few weird Amazon listings that pop up in various countries after this, with release dates in 2006. And a lot of unverified fan-run websites treat these Amazon dates as gospel, with many of these sites even claiming with conviction that the game did come out in 2006. But these websites are obviously filled with inaccuracies and a ton of guesswork, so putting all of that to the side, Garfield Bound for Home officially existed from May 2005 to October 2005. So, what happened to this game? Well, I'll be upfront with you. This is one of those lost media videos where there isn't going to be a satisfying answer. The purpose of this video is almost exclusively to hopefully find someone out there who will either know who to contact about this title or know who not to contact, or preferably that someone watching this is the person to contact. So let's talk about potential leads, potential theories, and what has been eliminated. One of the first theories that was explored by our Discord team was simply that Garfield Bound for Home was an awkward working title for a Garfield DS game that did end up existing. This was the least exciting option, and thus naturally, it felt the most likely. The two big leads here end up being Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties, and Garfield's Nightmare, produced by Two Tribes and Shinin Media respectively. So the first step was to reach out to people once involved in these two groups to see what people knew. The short of it? No one at Two Tribes or Shinin Multimedia who we have spoken to has ever heard of this game. Notably, we were told by one person that Tale of Two Kitties would have been a separate license entirely, since it was based on one of the Bill Murray movies and not just Garfield himself. So there's no chance that it could have started production as a normal Garfield title. Once we had ruled out that Bound for Home had been released in some way, I suggested we start looking into the developers of the GBA games. At this point, my favorite theory was that the title was developed by Interactive Vision, who had also worked on Garfield: The Search for Pookie. This theory was pleasing for numerous reasons. Interactive Vision had worked on the Garfield game immediately before these events, they were transitioning into making DS titles around this time, and most importantly, in 2005, the company declared bankruptcy, and were bought out by an American parent company in Boston. One licensed game falling through the cracks and failing to get finished during an international buyout just seemed very plausible and convenient. However, we contacted a former producer at the company who told us he left around 2005 or 2006, but that he had never heard of Garfield Bound for Home, despite having personally worked on Garfield: The Search for Pookie. This makes Interactive Vision sadly extremely unlikely, but not entirely ruled out. Finally, we did reach out to someone at Lucky Jump Games, not really expecting much. However, this was the most promising lead by far. We spoke to Bill Baffy, the co-founder of the company, who told us that Lucky Jump Games did not make Garfield Bound for Home. However, he did recall the name being mentioned at some point, and he indicated that Lucky Jump Games might have been considered to develop the title, but that it ended up going to someone else, and he couldn't remember who or the circumstances of why. As I said, this was the most promising interaction we had looking into this because Bill was the first person we contacted who had any idea what the hell we were talking about. So you might now be wondering why we haven't reached out to the game's publisher, The Game Factory. Well, the company hasn't really existed since 2008. To be quite frank here, shovelware developers were really killed off by the release of the iPhone. But the short of it is that we have reached out to quite a few people who were at the Game Factory in 2005, and every single time, the people we've contacted have failed to remember the differences between all the Garfield games that they worked on. Basically, to people who worked at this publisher, they worked to churn out 5 Garfield titles, worked to get them published, and they were all kind of the same, and no one could remember any hard details or, like I said, the differences between these 5 games. So that's where we are right now. It's basically this revolving door of asking random developers, hey, did you make this Garfield game? And they say, no, get out of my house, and then we try it with someone else. And it sucks to say this, but until we have a developer name or someone who knows more details about this story, we're at a dead end here. So at this point, the best thing is to stop and say, hey, do you know what happened to Garfield Bound for Home? Do you know someone who worked at a European game company in 2005 and might have been involved with this? Did you yourself work at the Game Factory or Paws Incorporated in 2005? Were you, the person watching this video, one of the sole people who single-handedly developed this title? If you have any leads about this topic, please send an email to contactquentinreviews@gmail.com. And if you're interested in joining the community for updates, we do have a Discord community for the search, and that will be linked in the description down below. And finally, fellow Discord user Household Warrior has also made a video about this, and I encourage you to check that out for an alternate take on this situation. Before we wrap up here, I just want to say a few extra things, I guess, things that apparently didn't work into the script. I'm really, really fascinated by this game. Because the way that it's so barely mentioned in all of these press releases and so few details were known, your first instinct might be that there was never a developer because they couldn't find someone, right? Like that might be one way to read it. That there are so few details online about this that maybe the game never started being made. Maybe it was just a game that was braggadociously, mentioned in all these press releases, and maybe development never started. But that doesn't make sense to me with the confidence they had with these release dates. I mean, summer 2005 saying we're putting this out, November, December this year. It kind of seems like something had to be done. They must have had a developer, and it's just so very strange because you would think there'd be more information about this out there, but there's just not. And I'm really hoping that by putting this video out, we might get some more answers, because I'm just very, very interested in the truth of what's going on here. But with that, I've been Quentin Reed2s. Thank you so much for watching, and happy hunting!